When my son Daniel and his wife Serafina moved in, I believed I was helping family. But as I opened my home, she started sneaking out every Tuesday at 3 a.m. No explanation, just a quiet defiance. I simply observed, pretending not to notice. She thought her secret was safe, but those early morning excursions were weaving her downfall. Like, share, and tell me where you are listening from. The silence in my home had become a heavy blanket since Arthur passed. My husband, gone 2 years now, had left behind not just an emptiness in my heart, but also a cavernous quiet in the house we had built together, brick by loving brick. At 64, I often found myself wandering through rooms, talking to myself, or simply staring out the window, a familiar ache settling deep in my bones. So when my son, Daniel, called, his voice laced with uncharacteristic worry, asking if he and his wife, Serafina, could move in temporarily, a tiny flicker of hope ignited within me. Daniel, my only child, usually exuded a quiet strength, but the economic downturn had hit his small architectural firm hard. He and Serafina, his wife of 3 years, had recently lost a significant project, leaving them financially vulnerable. Their rent on a charming but expensive city apartment had become unsustainable. My home, a spacious 4-bedroom haven, felt like a beacon of stability, ready to welcome them. I didn't hesitate. "Of course, darling," I'd said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is your home too. Come anytime." Their arrival was a breath of fresh air. Suddenly, the house buzzed with laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the gentle murmur of conversation. Serafina, a vision of youthful grace and charm, was everything a mother-in-law could wish for. She was polite, always remembering to thank me for meals, offering to help with chores, and always with a warm smile that reached her eyes. She complimented my cooking, admired my garden, and listened intently when I recounted stories of Arthur. For a time, she seemed to effortlessly fill the void Arthur had left, bringing a vibrant energy that chased away the lingering shadows. I found myself feeling lighter, happier, with a renewed sense of purpose. It was wonderful, truly wonderful. But as the weeks folded into months, a subtle dissonance began to play beneath the surface of Serafina's perfect facade. She was a private woman, I'd initially thought, which was fair enough. We all have our boundaries. Yet her privacy bordered on secrecy. Whenever I gently inquire about her family, her childhood in another state, or even her past jobs, her answers were vague, evasive, almost practiced. She'd smoothly deflect with a question about my own day, or redirect the conversation to Daniel's work. There was an unwritten past about Serafina, a wall she'd carefully constructed, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. It was nothing concrete, just a faint tickle at the back of my mind, a whisper of intuition I'd learned to trust over 64 years. Then the strange routine began. It started innocently enough, or so I tried to tell myself. One Tuesday morning around 3 o'clock, a faint creak on the floorboards above my bedroom stirred me from a light sleep. I dismissed it as the old house settling, or perhaps Daniel getting a glass of water. But a few weeks later, the exact same scenario repeated. This time, I heard a soft click of the front door. My curiosity piqued. I quietly rose, peering through the slight gap in my curtains. In the dim glow of the street lamp, I saw Serafina. She was dressed in dark clothing, a small, nondescript suitcase clutched in her hand as she slipped out of the house. I stared at the empty space where she had been, my heart doing a peculiar flutter. My daughter-in-law vanishing into the pre-dawn darkness with a suitcase. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. An early flight? A night shift at a secret job? But Daniel worked long, demanding hours, and was always exhausted. He was sound asleep next to Serafina when she left, utterly oblivious. And a secret job? Why would she hide it? She and Daniel were living under my roof because of financial difficulties. It didn't make sense. The pattern became undeniable over several weeks. Every Tuesday, without fail, precisely at 3 a.m., I would hear the same soft creak, the quiet footsteps, the gentle click of the front door. She would be gone for 2 to 3 hours, returning before dawn, slipping back into the house as silently as she had left. Her return was always meticulously quiet, a ghost in her own home. Sometimes when I pretended to be asleep as she passed my door, I thought I heard a faint rustle, perhaps her quickly changing her clothes. Once, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the hall mirror as she turned the corner. She looked a little disheveled, hair slightly out of place, but she regained her composed demeanor remarkably fast. Daniel, bless his heart, remained completely oblivious. His job as an architect had become even more demanding, often keeping him at the office until late evenings, leaving him drained. He loved Serafina deeply, showering her with affection, utterly trusting her. He saw only the charming, helpful woman who brightened our home, never the shadowy figure who vanished into the night. I tried, subtly at first, to fish for information. "Slept well, dear?" I'd ask over breakfast, watching her carefully. "You're an early bird, aren't you?" She'd smile, a little too brightly, and change the subject. "Oh, just ran a few errands, Eleanor," or "had a restless night, decided to get some fresh air." Her answers were always vague, her eyes never quite meeting mine. A chill would spread through me each time she deftly sidestepped my inquiries. The vague answers, combined with her impenetrable past, solidified my resolve. I started a small notebook, a discreet, leather-bound journal I usually used for gardening notes. Every Tuesday, I jot down the precise time Serafina departed and returned. It felt almost clandestine, like I was conducting an investigation in my own home against my own daughter-in-law. But the growing entries, the undeniable consistency of the timestamps, confirmed what my gut already knew. Something was very wrong. Despite my rational mind attempting to conjure innocent explanations, a secret hobby, a volunteering effort, even a clandestine support group, that deep, primal gut feeling screamed otherwise. It was the wisdom of age, I suppose, the maternal instinct that sensed danger, even when it wore a charming smile. The contrast between her daytime perfection and her nighttime secrecy was stark, a duality that gnawed at me. Daniel adored her, his love blinding him to any potential flaws, and I hesitated to voice my burgeoning concerns, fearing I would sow discord in his happy marriage. One afternoon, Serafina even offered to help with household expenses, placing a crisp stack of bills on the kitchen counter. "I found a way to make some extra money, Eleanor," she said, her smile radiant. "It's nothing big, but I want to contribute." It was a kind gesture, meant to show gratitude and responsibility, but instead of easing my mind, it only intensified my unease. If they were facing such financial hardship that they had to move in, where was this money coming from? And why the continued secrecy about it? The questions piled up, creating an invisible wall between Serafina and me, a wall built of her silences and my unspoken suspicions. The crisp October air carried the first hint of winter, a biting chill that seeped through the windows. It was Tuesday again, and as the clock on my bedside table edged past 2:50 a.m., my heart began to pound with a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Tonight, I decided, the charade would end. The endless nights of restless sleep, the nagging whispers of doubt, the carefully maintained facade of ignorance. I could no longer endure it. My maternal instinct, now a roaring lion, demanded answers. At precisely 3:00 a.m., the familiar creak, then the soft, practiced footsteps. I heard Serafina's door gently click shut, followed by the faint rustle of her moving down the stairs. My breath hitched in my throat. I waited a full minute after the front door latched, giving her enough lead time. My old Honda, a loyal, slightly rusty companion of many years, was parked just a few houses down the street, its engine surprisingly quiet for its age. I had strategically backed it in the previous evening, ready for a quick, silent departure. Slipping out of the house was easier than I anticipated. Years of tiptoeing around sleeping children and late-night gardening escapades had honed my stealth. The night was moonless, cloaked in a thick, velvety darkness, a perfect cover. I eased into my car, turning the ignition with a prayer that the engine wouldn't sputter too loudly. It hummed to life. I kept the headlights off for as long as possible, navigating by the faint glow of distant streetlights until I was a safe distance behind Serafina. She was walking, moving with a brisk, determined stride. For 20 minutes I tailed her, a shadow among shadows. She maintained a steady pace, her form a dark silhouette against the barely illuminated suburban streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins. Where was she going? What was she doing? Each minute felt like an hour. Then she veered off the main road, turning onto a secluded dirt path that led deep into the woods bordering Miller's Lake. My gut clenched. Miller's Lake was a local landmark, known for its tranquil beauty by day and its isolated, almost eerie silence by night. It was not a place one went for a casual stroll at 3 in the morning. I parked my Honda well out of sight, killed the engine, and then, relying on the minimal ambient light, I followed on foot. The crunch of fallen leaves beneath my sensible walking shoes felt impossibly loud in the stillness of the woods. I moved carefully, staying behind the thick curtain of trees, peeking through the gaps. I saw her at the water's edge, a small, solitary figure illuminated by the faint glow of the distant city skyline reflected on the lake's surface. She knelt, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. With trembling hands, Serafina opened the small suitcase she always carried. My eyes, now accustomed to the gloom, strained to see. She began to pull out what looked like documents, flat rectangular objects, and with a nervous glance around, though there was no one but me, hidden in the shadows, she tossed them into the murky water one by one. I heard the faint splashes. After the papers came smaller objects, glinting briefly as they caught the minimal light before disappearing beneath the surface. They looked metallic. Rings? Coins? I couldn't tell. The speed with which she emptied the contents, the almost frantic movements, contradicted her usual calm, collected demeanor. This wasn't a leisurely disposal, it was an urgent act of concealment. When the suitcase was empty, she stood up abruptly, slammed it shut, and then, instead of walking, she almost ran, disappearing back down the dirt path as if the very air around the lake was tainted. I waited. I waited until the sound of her retreating footsteps had completely vanished, until the only sounds were the whisper of the wind through the trees and the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. Then, heart still thumping a frantic rhythm, I made my way to the water's edge. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The lake looked like a dark, inscrutable mirror, reflecting the few distant stars. A derelict, flat-bottomed fishing boat, half submerged, lay moored to a gnarled tree root. It was old and leaky, but it was all I had. I carefully waded into the icy water, the cold seeping through my shoes and chilling me to the bone. The water was surprisingly shallow near the shore, but the bottom was a treacherous muck of mud and weeds. I used the old boat as a makeshift platform, leaning over the side, straining my eyes in the dim light. My fingers, numb with cold, probed the slimy bottom. And then I felt something, a distinct shape. I grasped it, pulling it from the cold embrace of the lake. It was a waterlogged plastic card. As my eyes adjusted, my breath hitched. It was a driver's license, and the photo was undeniably Serafina. But the name, Victoria Green. My blood ran cold. I continued to search, pulling more items from the muck. Waterlogged social security cards, birth certificates, more driver's licenses. All bore Serafina's face, but each carried a different name. Lila Mendez, Brooke Thompson, Emily Carter, Jessica Adams. At least 6 fake identities, each carefully crafted, each a testament to a life not lived, or perhaps many lives lived under false pretenses. My mind reeled. The woman sleeping in my house, the woman my son loved, was not who she claimed to be. Mixed among the official documents were more personal, chilling items. A delicate silver wedding ring, its design distinctly different from the one Daniel had given her. A small, tarnished locket, which, when pried open with numb fingers, revealed a faded photograph of Serafina, younger, with a broad, genuine smile, standing beside an unknown man, his arm wrapped affectionately around her. Who was he? What was their story? And then I found it, a small, water-resistant notebook, its pages still mostly legible despite the damp. I flipped through it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. It wasn't a diary, it was a meticulous record. Names, addresses, phone numbers, and chillingly detailed daily routines of people I didn't know. Mr. Henderson leaves 7:15 a.m., returns 6:30 p.m., gym Tuesdays and Thursdays, wife works part-time. Mrs. Jenkins, elderly, lives alone, weekly grocery delivery Wednesday 10 a.m. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just identity theft. This was something far more sinister, far more organized. It felt like a hit list or a plan for something terrible. I stuffed what I could salvage into my pockets, my hands shaking so vehemently I almost dropped them. The weight of the wet, cold objects felt like a crushing burden. I scrambled back to my car, my mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The drive home was a blur of terror. The pre-dawn dark seemed to press in on me, suffocating. One terrifying thought repeated itself over and over in my mind, a chilling mantra. Daniel is sleeping next to a dangerous stranger. The pre-dawn light was still a distant promise when I finally returned home, my body shivering from the cold lake water, but my mind aflame with a terrifying realization. Daniel was still asleep, his innocent breathing a gentle rhythm from upstairs. I couldn't bring myself to go to bed, not with the weight of what I'd found pressing down on me. Instead, I carefully laid the waterlogged documents on my kitchen table, spreading them out on a clean dish towel. The harsh overhead light illuminated my grim discovery, each item a piece of a sinister puzzle. The fake IDs, driver's licenses, social security cards, birth certificates were disturbingly authentic. The plastic felt real, the holograms shimmered convincingly, and the printing was crisp. These weren't amateurish forgeries, they were professionally made, suggesting a sophisticated operation, not just a lone con artist. Serafina's face stared back at me from each card, her smile subtly different in some, her hair styled slightly, unlike her current look in others, but undeniably her. Victoria Green, Lila Mendez, Brooke Thompson, Emily Carter, Jessica Adams, 6 identities, 6 different lives, all belonging to the woman currently sleeping under my roof. The implication was staggering, but it was the notebook that truly chilled me to the bone. Its pages, though damp, were still legible, the ink resisting the water remarkably well. It was filled with neat, precise handwriting. Serafina's elegant script, detailing not her innermost thoughts, but the innermost lives of others. It was a stalker's diary, a chilling compendium of vulnerabilities. My gaze fell upon an entry that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Albright, 72, lives alone at 421 Maple Street. Walks her dog every morning at 7:15. House key hidden under the flower pot. Pension check arrives first Wednesday of each month. Mrs. Albright, my neighbor, a sweet elderly woman who often shared garden tips with me, her cheerful disposition a constant source of joy in our quiet community. Her house was barely 3 blocks away from mine. Serafina knew where Mrs. Albright lived, her routine, her vulnerabilities, even the location of her spare key. And today was the first Wednesday of the month. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. Another entry detailed Mr. and Mrs. Davies, longtime members of our church community. Mr. Davies leaves for work. 8:00 a.m., returns 5:30 p.m. Mrs. Davies, part-time librarian, works Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Teenage daughter Sarah, frequently sick, often home alone. No security system. The Davies, pillars of the community, kind, generous people. Their teenage daughter, a quiet, studious girl who sometimes helped me with my garden. Serafina had meticulously documented their schedules, their weaknesses, their very lives. There were at least 20 such entries, each one a detailed profile of a potential target. Some were people I knew well. My bridge partners, my neighbors, fellow churchgoers. Others were less familiar, but all were clearly members of our quiet, trusting community. My community. Serafina hadn't just moved into my home. She had infiltrated my entire world, studying its inhabitants like prey. She had been watching them, studying them, planning something sinister, something that required multiple identities and a detailed knowledge of their routines. It wasn't just about financial difficulty for her and Daniel. This was a calculated, cold-blooded operation. The first rays of dawn pierced through the kitchen window, casting a pale, unforgiving light on the evidence before me. I quickly gathered the documents, carefully wrapping them in a plastic bag and tucking them deep into the back of my pantry, behind a stack of rarely used casserole dishes. I had to appear normal. I had to protect Daniel, protect my community, and protect myself. As I heard Serafina stirring upstairs, I quickly made a fresh pot of coffee and began to toast some bread. My hands still trembled slightly, but I forced them to be steady. When she came down, dressed impeccably as always, her usual radiant smile gracing her lips, I offered her a cup with feigned cheerfulness. "Morning, dear," I said, trying to keep my voice light. But as I looked at her, my eyes now saw a different person. Not the charming daughter-in-law who had brought laughter back into my home, but a calculating predator cloaked in an innocent facade. I noticed how her gaze flickered, constantly, subtly, assessing her surroundings. Her eyes seemed to take in both the front and back doors, her posture always slightly tense, as if poised for flight. Her smile, once so genuine, now seemed like a mask. I recalled her evasiveness about her past, her lack of personal history, and it all clicked into place. She was a blank slate, designed to be whatever she needed to be. "Eleanor, you look exhausted," Serafina said, her voice laced with what seemed like genuine concern. She reached across the table, placing her cool hand over mine. "You really should try to get more sleep. Perhaps Dr. Hayes could prescribe something to help you relax." The irony was not lost on me. Here she was offering me sleep medication, her touch seemingly compassionate, while the very reason for my sleepless night, her dark secret, was hidden away just feet from us. The same hand that now gripped mine, so gentle and warm, had just hours before thrown incriminating evidence into the cold, dark waters of Miller's Lake. I forced a weak smile, a shiver running down my spine as I felt the warmth of her touch, now a chilling sensation. "Perhaps," I murmured, pulling my hand away subtly. "Perhaps I will." The days that followed my discovery at Miller's Lake were a blur of heightened senses and constant vigilance. Every interaction with Serafina was now viewed through a terrifying new lens. The charming daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my home had transformed, in my eyes, into a cunning predator. I watched her, silently, meticulously, every movement, every word, every gesture scrutinized for hidden meaning. I began to notice her frequent volunteering efforts around town. She spent mornings at the community center, helping organize events for local families. In the afternoon, she would assist at the library, shelving books and offering a kind word to patrons. And most disturbingly, she spent a significant amount of time at the Senior Citizen Center, playing cards with the residents, helping with bingo, and even offering to run errands. These weren't just acts of selfless community service. They were perfect conduits for gathering information, for weaving herself into the fabric of people's lives and earning their trust. My previous naive self would have praised her civic-mindedness. Now I saw a spider spinning its web. Her knowledge of our neighbors grew unnervingly specific. At dinner one evening, Serafina casually mentioned that old Mr. Sterling, who lived down the street, was struggling with his new diabetes medication. "His daughter told me at the library yesterday," she chirped. "He looked quite frail." Daniel nodded sympathetically. I, however, knew that Mr. Sterling rarely spoke to his estranged daughter, and even more rarely to anyone about his medical conditions. Another time she commented on Mrs. Henderson's recent fall, mentioning the fractured hip and the expensive physical therapy. "I heard it at the senior center while playing bridge," she explained. "Poor dear, she's so worried about the bills." Serafina always had a plausible explanation for her intimate knowledge. A conversation overheard, a casual remark from a friend, a neighbor she'd met at one of her volunteer stints. But I recognized the pattern, the methodical collection of seemingly innocuous details. It wasn't chance encounters, it was a targeted, deliberate effort to gather intelligence. My gut churned with a sickening certainty. The names in her notebook weren't just random observations. They were her targets. The second Tuesday after my initial discovery arrived, heralded by a persistent internal dread. I had spent the intervening days steeling myself, preparing for what I might find. I had secretly purchased a new waterproof flashlight, rubber gloves, and a small, heavy-duty plastic bag. I had even practiced the walk to Miller's Lake during daylight hours, mapping out the safest, most discreet route, imagining myself as a silent hunter. As 3:00 a.m. approached, I pretended to be sound asleep, feigning the deep, even breathing of undisturbed slumber. I heard the familiar creak, the soft footsteps, the quiet click of the front door. My heart pounded, but this time it was a steady, determined beat. I waited a beat longer than last time, then slipped out of the house. My Honda started with a low hum, its engine a familiar comfort in the vast silence of the night. I kept my distance, my eyes fixed on Serafina's shadowy figure. She walked the same route, turned onto the same dirt path, a creature of chilling habit. I parked my car, extinguished the lights, and followed on foot, my new flashlight clutched in my gloved hand. At the water's edge, the scene was eerily similar to 2 weeks prior, yet more chilling. Serafina knelt, her posture tense, and again opened her small suitcase. This time, I focused intently on the items she discarded. More documents, yes, but also what looked like small pieces of jewelry, glinting silver and gold as they arced through the air before hitting the water. Tiny electronic devices, too small to identify from my vantage point. And then a new horrifying addition. Small, orange and white prescription medication bottles. They're labeled unreadable into the dark. She emptied the suitcase with the same hurried, almost desperate movements, then fled the scene, a shadowy wraith disappearing into the night. I waited, counting slowly to 200, giving her ample time to be gone. Then, flashlight beam cutting a path through the darkness, I made my way to the lake. The water was even colder this time, biting at my exposed skin as I waded in, the rubber gloves offering little solace against the frigid grip. My hands plunged into the murky depths, searching, probing, my fingers closing around slippery, cold objects. Each item I retrieved sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Among the waterlogged documents, I found another batch of fake IDs, identical to the first. But then something else surfaced, something that made my blood freeze in my veins. A death certificate, and the name on it was Victoria Green, one of Serafina's aliases. The cause of death listed, accidental overdose. My stomach lurched. Was this her, faking her own death to escape some past? Or was it something else? More items emerged, maxed out credit cards, not in Serafina's name, but in the names of complete strangers. Bank statements showing suspicious withdrawals and transfers. Large sums of money siphoned from accounts belonging to names I didn't recognize, but whose names I vaguely remembered hearing at the community center. And then, the small address book. This wasn't the detailed stalker's diary from the first week. This was different, more concise, more sinister. It contained names of elderly people from the community, Mrs. Albright, Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Henderson. Beneath each name were chillingly specific notes. Takes heart medication, opportunity for confusion. No close family, low risk of investigation. Prone to memory lapses, easy to manipulate. It listed their medications, their medical conditions, their financial situations, even their vulnerabilities to coercion. The pieces slammed together with a sickening thud. Serafina wasn't just stealing identities or money. She was systematically targeting vulnerable seniors, meticulously planning elaborate fraud and theft. The accidental overdose on Victoria Green's death certificate echoed a horrifying possibility. If these victims posed a threat, if they resisted, if they knew too much, Serafina was not only willing to exploit them, but she was also willing to make them disappear, or worse, make their deaths look like accidents. Daniel was not just sleeping next to a dangerous stranger. He was sleeping next to a cold-blooded criminal, a potential murderer. The realization was a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and terrified. The following morning, the tension in the house was a palpable hum beneath the forced normalcy. Serafina was exceptionally alert, her eyes constantly scanning, lingering on me a moment longer than necessary. Her smile, while still present, felt brittle, her composure a finely spun thread ready to snap. She sensed my unease, my distraction, though she couldn't possibly have known its true source. "Eleanor, you seem troubled," she observed, her voice smooth as silk, yet with an underlying edge. "Is everything all right? You've been so quiet." She reached across the breakfast table, taking my hand. Her touch, once comforting, now sent a jolt of pure dread through me. "Remember, we're family now. You can always talk to me." The word family felt like poison on her lips, a vile mockery of the truth. I forced a smile. murmuring something about a restless night, my mind racing, calculating. I had to act, and soon. Later that morning, as Serafina left for her usual rounds of volunteering, undoubtedly gathering more intelligence, I seized my opportunity. My heart pounded, a frantic drum in my chest, but my resolve was iron. I had to know the full extent of her evil. I crept upstairs to her room, the door she always meticulously kept locked, but which after careful observation I knew she only secured with a simple hook and eye latch on the inside that could be jiggled open with a straightened paperclip. My hands, surprisingly steady, found the hidden clip. A soft click and the door swung open. The room was neat, almost sterile, reflecting Serafina's controlled nature. I began my search, starting with the obvious places, then moving to the less conspicuous. Behind a rack of winter coats in the back of her closet, I found them. Several large storage boxes, neatly labeled. Inside, my blood ran cold. Fake IDs, not just the 6 I'd retrieved from the lake, but dozens more, organized by state and alias. Detailed files on scores of elderly people, complete with photographs, medical histories, financial statements, and meticulously compiled daily routines. These weren't just local targets. These were victims from multiple states, a horrifying testament to a criminal career spanning years. There were bank statements showing massive, suspicious withdrawals and transfers, clear evidence of years of identity theft and financial fraud, all attributed to the aliases. But the most terrifying discovery was a small, unassuming notebook, tucked away at the bottom of a box simply labeled Current Projects. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, my gaze fell upon a tabbed section. The heading screamed at me, Project Eleanor. My breath caught in my throat. My own name. I flipped through the pages, my vision blurring. Here it was, my daily routine, my health conditions, my financial situation, even a detailed analysis of my relationship with Daniel. And next to it, Project Daniel, outlining his work schedule, his trust in Serafina, his blind spots. The timeline laid out a horrifying plan indicating Serafina intended to make Daniel and me her next victims, and soon. I sank onto the edge of her bed, physically ill. The methodical, calculated operation of a seasoned criminal was laid bare before me. The files were meticulously organized, categorized by state and victim type. Elderly widows like me, single seniors living alone, older couples with substantial savings. Serafina specialized in vulnerability. One file, particularly disturbing, detailed the death of a woman named Agnes Ling from Phoenix, Arizona. The timeline was sickeningly familiar. Serafina, under the alias Lila Mendez, had befriended Agnes, a lonely widow gradually moving in as her caregiver. The notes documented how she systematically isolated Agnes from her few remaining friends and family, subtly manipulating her medications. There were chilling entries about gradual increase of pain medication to manage discomfort. And then, with sickening precision, a final entry. Administered final dose, patient unresponsive, notified authorities, appearing distraught. Agnes Ling had died 6 months prior, officially from natural causes. Serafina had moved to our town just 2 weeks later. I found similar patterns in 4 other files, each meticulously documented. Each victim was elderly, isolated, and each had died under suspiciously similar circumstances. Natural causes or accidental overdose, always after Serafina's intervention as a trusted caregiver or companion. Her expertise wasn't just in identity theft, it was in the chilling art of creating convincing alibis and manipulating medications to appear accidental, lethal, and untraceable. My blood ran cold as I reread Project Eleanor. The plan was clear. Isolate me from Daniel and my neighbors, slowly plant seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind, portraying me as having early onset dementia. Then she would seamlessly transition into my primary caregiver, introducing medication errors and confusion episodes, the very methods that had led to the deaths of her previous victims. A sickening realization washed over me. She had already begun phase 1, her subtle comments to Daniel about my forgetfulness, her concern about my tiredness, her casual offer to help with my medications, all meticulously planned steps. My hands, though still trembling, moved with purpose. I pulled out my cell phone and began photographing everything. The fake IDs, the detailed victim files, and most importantly, the chilling pages of Project Eleanor, with its timeline of my impending demise. The flash was almost imperceptible in the dim closet light. I had to document this, every single detail, before she returned. I knew too much. I had seen too much. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a death sentence if she found out I knew. I had become incredibly dangerous to Serafina, and for that, I knew she would eliminate me. With trembling hands and a heart that felt like a trapped bird, I managed to replace every damning piece of evidence exactly as I'd found it. The fake IDs, the victim files, the current project's notebook, all tucked back into their hiding place behind the winter coats. I smoothed the bedspread, straightened the pillows, and wiped away any trace of my presence. Just as I finished, I heard the faint click of the front door. Serafina was back. I hurried downstairs, forcing a casual stroll, a benign smile plastered on my face. She stood in the doorway, that familiar sweet smile gracing her lips. But her eyes, I noticed, were sharp, darting around the living room, assessing. A cold, calculating look flickered across her face for a split second before the mask settled firmly back into place. "Eleanor, dear," she began, her voice falsely light. "I was just speaking to Dr. Hayes' nurse while I was at the senior center. Such a lovely woman. She mentioned how easy it is for older folks to get their medications mixed up. All those pills, it can be quite confusing." My blood ran cold. This was it. This was phase 1, just as outlined in Project Eleanor. She continued, "Perhaps I could help you organize your pills, just to make sure you don't have any accidental overdoses. We wouldn't want that, would we?" The words, delivered with a sickeningly sweet concern, felt like daggers. Accidental overdose. The phrase echoed from Agnes Ling's death certificate, from the files of all her other victims. She wasn't just suggesting help, she was signaling her intent. "Oh, that's very kind of you, dear," I replied, my voice remarkably steady despite the terror coiling in my stomach. "But I've been managing my medications perfectly well for years. I have a little pill box, you see. Every morning, I just pop them out. No confusion here." I forced a little chuckle, trying to appear nonchalant. For a fleeting moment, her sweet facade shattered. Her eyes hardened, a flash of pure, cold calculation, a predatory gleam that made my stomach clench. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the saccharine smile. "Of course, Eleanor, you're so independent. I admire that about you." She paused, then added, her voice dropping a notch, "But your insomnia seems to be getting worse. Dr. Hayes could really help with that. Lack of sleep can affect memory and judgment, you know. Make one a little forgetful." My mind raced. She wasn't just offering help, she was setting the stage. Any resistance I offered, any protest, any attempt to reveal her secrets would be conveniently attributed to my insomnia-induced memory lapses or a general decline in my judgment. She was preempting my every move, carefully constructing a narrative of my mental instability, a narrative that would make Daniel doubt anything I said. She was signaling her intention to drug me, and any protest would simply reinforce her story that I was confused. That evening at dinner, Serafina was a paragon of a concerned daughter-in-law. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, listened intently to his day, and then, with practiced subtlety, turned her attention to me. "Eleanor, darling," she said, her voice dripping with affection, "I've noticed you've been a little forgetful lately, and so tired. Perhaps we should talk to Dr. Hayes about some medication to help you sleep. And maybe I could just keep an eye on your other pills for you, just to help lighten your load." Daniel, exhausted from his day, looked at me with genuine concern. "She's right, Mom. You do seem a bit off, a little distracted. Serafina's just trying to help." His loving, trusting eyes, so blind to the monster beside him, pierced me with a fresh wave of despair. I wanted to scream, to yank out the photographs from my pocket and slap them on the table, to expose her right then and there. But I knew Daniel. He adored Serafina, trusted her implicitly. Without undeniable, irrefutable proof, he would never believe me. He would see it as a symptom of my supposed decline, a confused old woman lashing out. Any attempt to reveal the truth would only solidify Serafina's insidious narrative of my mental instability. I had become the helpless victim in her perfectly crafted play. That night, lying in my bed, the silence of the house was punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own heart. At 3 o'clock a.m., I heard the familiar creak, the soft footsteps, the quiet click of the front door. Serafina was out again, discarding more evidence, perhaps planning her next move against me. But this time, I wasn't just terrified, I was furious. The photographs on my phone, the chilling details in Project Eleanor, the grim fates of Agnes Ling and the others, they hammered home a stark reality. I wasn't just fighting for my own life anymore. Her files contained the detailed vulnerabilities of other innocent people in our community, my friends, my neighbors, who were just as susceptible to her predatory machinations. If I didn't stop her, she would continue to destroy lives, leaving a trail of accidental deaths and stolen inheritances. I knew what I had to do. I resolved to follow Serafina to the lake one last time. This wouldn't just be about gathering more evidence. This would be about ending it once and for all. The night air was a cold, sharp blade against my skin as I once again followed Serafina's silent departure. This time I was armed not just with a flashlight, but with my cell phone, its video recording function ready, and printouts of the most damning victim files tucked into my pocket. My plan was simple, desperate: confront Serafina at the lake, force a confession, and capture it on camera. The fear was still there, a constant tremor in my bones, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce protective rage. I followed her familiar route, my old Honda a ghost in the night, its engine a barely audible purr. When she turned onto the dirt path leading to Miller's Lake, I parked my car deeper in the woods than usual, ensuring it was completely concealed. I crept through the trees, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, envisioning the moment I would step out of the shadows, exposing her. But what I saw next shattered my carefully constructed plan. Serafina was not alone. As she reached the water's edge, a tall, thin man emerged from the deeper shadows of the woods. He moved with the same predatory precision I had come to associate with Serafina, a subtle, almost imperceptible tension in his posture. He was well-dressed, in dark, nondescript clothing, his face partially obscured by the brim of a baseball cap. My mind instantly flashed to the faded photograph in the locket, the unknown man beside Serafina. Could it be him? They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, too low for me to discern the words, but their body language spoke volumes. He took the suitcase from Serafina's hand, his movements efficient and practiced. He too began to dispose of items in the lake, documents and small, glinting objects. But I also noticed him placing some things into a separate, smaller bag he carried. This wasn't just about destroying evidence. It was about organized collection, about ongoing operations. This was a partnership, a larger, more sophisticated criminal enterprise than I had dared to imagine. After their grim business was concluded, Serafina and the man, whom I now internally dubbed Arthur, the name of my late husband, as a bitter irony, didn't disappear back into the woods on foot. Instead, a dark sedan, previously hidden from my view, rumbled to life deeper in the tree line. They both climbed in, and the car sped away, its taillights rapidly vanishing into the night. My breath hitched. Multiple vehicles, multiple escape routes. This wasn't just Serafina. This was a network. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Going to the police with my grainy photos and waterlogged documents, the word of an insomniac, forgetful old woman, would be futile. They would dismiss it as circumstantial, and Serafina, with her network and multiple identities, would simply vanish, leaving Daniel heartbroken and me looking like a delusional old woman. I needed something more, something undeniable. Over the next few days, I changed tactics. Instead of confronting her, I began my own, more discreet surveillance. I observed Serafina from a distance, watching her charming her way into the lives of lonely seniors in our community. I saw her at Mrs. Albright's house, bringing a casserole. I saw her helping Mr. Sterling with his groceries. I saw her having coffee with Mrs. Henderson, her arm linked through the elderly woman's, an image of compassionate support. She was systematically inserting herself, weaving her insidious web tighter and tighter around her next victims. Then came her subtle warning. "Eleanor," Serafina said one afternoon, her smile a little too wide, her eyes a little too knowing, "I thought I saw your car parked near Mrs. Albright's house yesterday. Such an odd hour for you to be out, darling. I was worried you might be feeling unwell." A chill ran down my spine. She knew. She knew I was following her, watching her. The game was escalating, and I was losing ground. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Despite my earlier resolve not to, I had to try to warn Daniel. He had to know the truth. I called him home from work early, my voice tight with urgency. "Daniel, please, it's important. I need you here, now." When he arrived, looking harried and concerned, I led him to my study. I laid out everything, the printouts of the fake IDs, the photographs of the current project's notebook, the death certificates, the bank statements. I even showed him the waterlogged documents I'd hidden, though they were barely legible now. I explained, my voice trembling with emotion, about the lake, about the man, about the chilling details of Project Eleanor. His reaction was a dagger to my heart. Disbelief, swiftly followed by anger. "Mom, what is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Are you making this up? You've never liked Serafina, I know that, but this is insane. This is a fantasy. She's the kindest, most caring woman I know." He stood up, pacing the small room, running a hand through his hair. "She told me you'd been forgetful, a little confused, but I never thought this. You're accusing my wife, my loving wife, of being a murderer? You're delusional." His protective denial was absolute, impenetrable. Just then the front door opened, and Serafina's bright voice called out, "I'm home." Daniel's head snapped up. Serafina entered the study, her eyes sweeping over the scattered papers, then settling on my tear-streaked face and Daniel's furious one. Her smile remained, but her eyes held a chilling triumph. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It seems Eleanor is having another one of her episodes. The insomnia, Daniel, it's really affecting her judgment. You see how she gets? These wild stories, this confusion." She moved to Daniel's side, placing a comforting hand on his arm, her gaze firmly fixed on me, a silent, venomous warning. Daniel, torn and bewildered, turned to her, seeking reassurance. She delivered it flawlessly. "I told you, darling, she needs help. Perhaps it's time we consider getting her proper care." He looked at me, his eyes now filled with pity and a terrible, heartbreaking disbelief. I had made a terrible mistake. By showing my hand too early, without absolute, unimpeachable proof that Daniel would accept, I had only solidified Serafina's narrative of my mental instability. She had successfully painted me as unstable, delusional, and dangerous. I was now out of time, and completely, utterly on my own. The morning after Daniel's heartbreaking disbelief confirmed my worst fears. Serafina, with a solicitous air, informed me she'd made an appointment for me at Dr. Hayes's office for a cognitive assessment. Her smile was almost imperceptible, yet it conveyed a chilling triumph. The narrative of my mental decline was being cemented, brick by insidious brick. I knew I couldn't just wait for her plan to unfold. While Serafina was at the senior center, charming her next potential victims, I took my desperate chance. At the local library, I meticulously cross-referenced the names from Serafina's victim files with old obituaries. To my horror, I found several matches. An obituary for Agnes Ling, confirming her natural causes death. Another for Victoria Green, Serafina's alias, but listed as deceased in a different state, dying from an accidental overdose. Digging deeper, I found a small news article from that region, buried in local archives, subtly questioning the circumstances of Victoria Green's death, though no charges were ever filed. It wasn't much, but it was a pattern, a paper trail of death. Armed with these new findings, I went straight to the police station. I asked for Detective Olivia Miller. The officer I'd heard was tenacious and fair. I laid out my case, presenting the blurry photos from my phone, the waterlogged documents, the printouts of the obituaries. Detective Miller listened politely, her expression unreadable, but I could sense her skepticism. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "this is a lot of circumstantial evidence. While concerning, I need something more solid to get a warrant. A confession or undeniable physical evidence linking your daughter-in-law to these deaths. She asked me to promise not to do anything dangerous, to let the police handle it. I promised, but my mind was already formulating a different plan. Back home, I prepared for the final confrontation. I put together a sealed envelope addressed to Detective Miller, containing copies of all my evidence and a heartfelt letter to my granddaughter, explaining everything just in case. I hid these envelopes in several discreet locations, a final failsafe. At 2:30 a.m. on Tuesday, my heart hammered with a grim determination. I watched Serafina leave, suitcase in hand. This time, as she slipped out the door, she paused. Her head turned, and her eyes, cold and assessing, met my darkened window. It was a silent acknowledgement, a chilling premonition of the battle to come. She knew I was watching. I followed her, but tonight was different. The dark sedan was already waiting. Arthur emerged, not just to collect the suitcase, but to set up. Under the dim glow of the city, I saw them. Surgical gloves, large plastic bags, and what looked like medical supplies. My blood ran cold. They weren't just disposing of evidence tonight. They were preparing a murder scene. They intended to kill me. As I shifted to get a better view, a brittle branch underfoot cracked with an unnerving snap. Serafina's head shot up. Her eyes, even in the darkness, locked onto my hiding place. "Arthur!" she hissed. Panic seized me. I bolted, scrambling back to my car, fumbling with the keys, the engine roaring to life as I peeled away from the lake. The sedan's headlights flashed on behind me, but I knew the back roads better. I sped through the pre-dawn darkness, my mind a whirl of terror. Back home, I desperately tried to reach Detective Miller, but her line was busy. I called 911, my voice cracking, explaining everything. But the operator, hearing my frantic, breathless account, the accusations against my daughter-in-law, dismissed it as the report of a confused elderly woman, advising me to calm down and assuring me someone would check in later. I was truly on my own. Then a chilling memory surfaced. Serafina's notes in the victim files, about changing wills, about beneficiaries. My own will. I rushed to my safe, pulling out the official document. My hand shook as I read it. Forged. It was a perfectly executed forgery, leaving half my estate and a substantial $200,000 life insurance policy to Daniel and Serafina jointly. I was no longer just a target. I was an asset to be liquidated. I heard Serafina's car door slam, then her footsteps. She was back. This was it. This was my last night, unless I acted. My hands moved with a sudden, calm resolve. I pulled the small digital recorder from my robe pocket, activating it with a silent click. Then I walked into the kitchen, waiting. Serafina appeared in the doorway, her mask finally gone. Her eyes were hard, devoid of any warmth. Her voice, when she spoke, was cold, devoid of her usual sweetness. "We need to talk, Eleanor, about what you saw at the lake." She held up a bottle, my heart medication. "You know, at your age, an accidental overdose of these is remarkably easy to arrange. A simple mistake, a moment of confusion. No one would ever suspect a thing." She smiled then, a chilling, predatory baring of teeth. I feigned confusion, buying precious seconds. "Accidental overdose?" I mumbled. "But who would do such a thing? And your partner?" He seemed rather efficient. The mention of Arthur genuinely surprised her. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her face, but it quickly morphed into a boastful sneer. "Arthur? Oh, he's very good at making problems disappear. Like Agnes Ling. He's a professional." As Serafina lunged forward, her hand reaching for my face, prepared to force the pills into my mouth, I played my trump card. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. On the screen, an active call, the words "Detective Miller" clearly visible. "Detective Miller," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Did you hear all of that? About Agnes Ling? About my accidental overdose?" A voice, crisp and clear through the phone's speaker, confirmed. "Loud and clear, Mrs. Vance. Officers are already en route." Serafina's face contorted in a snarl of pure rage. As she hesitated, I reacted. I grabbed the teapot, still warm from my earlier tea, and flung the steaming contents directly into her face. She screamed, staggering back, clutching at her eyes. Just then, Daniel rushed into the kitchen, drawn by the commotion, his eyes wide with bewilderment. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. Detective Miller, followed by two uniformed officers, burst through the front door. "Serafina Stone," Detective Miller announces, her voice authoritative. "You're under arrest." Serafina, her face now red and mottled, still tried to protest, but her words were cut short. "We have it all on recording, Serafina," Detective Miller stated. "Your confession, your partner's name, everything." She then turned to me, a small, genuine smile. "And your partner, Arthur, was apprehended 20 minutes ago. Once he realized we had your records from the lake and the other evidence you provided, he was quite cooperative." As the officers cuffed Serafina, she glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over, old woman," she spat, even as they led her away. Daniel, pale and shaken, could only stammer an apology. I embraced him, comforting my bewildered son as the weight of the last few months finally began to lift. Detective Miller later confirmed the horrifying truth. Serafina and Arthur had been operating a sophisticated network for over 7 years, responsible for the deaths of at least 12 vulnerable seniors across multiple states. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom, my voice steady, my testimony clear and unwavering. Serafina Stone received a life sentence without parole. Arthur, who cooperated, received 25 years. My life and Daniel's slowly began to heal. The lake was partially drained, yielding more evidence in the recovered belongings of Serafina's victims, bringing closure to grieving families. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, no longer a helpless widow, but a survivor. Age, I realized, didn't equate to helplessness. Sometimes the most unexpected individuals could fight back, even against pure evil.